Okay, let's talk about this TikTok ban and my theory on why I think it's a lot more nefarious than what we're seeing on the surface. And MAGA, I feel like you guys are going to try to argue against me, but do yourselves and me the favor of watching my video all the way through, hearing what I have to say instead of just arguing against what you think I'm going to say or putting words in my mouth and arguing against that, because straw mans don't work for me. And you guys have a habit of doing that shit. Understand that I'm a person that picks and chooses my words very intentionally. Yesterday, January 18th, 2025, a lot of us were doom scrolling, as we do. And we saw a message pop up saying that the January 19th ban is in effect and that as of January 19th, we would no longer have access to TikTok, that TikTok was working on a solution and we're going to try to have it back in a couple of days. Not 45 minutes later for a lot of people, but 4 hours early for the entire fucking United States, we saw that ban go into effect. Now, even though SCOTUS was like, yeah, let the ban go through, Joe Biden said that he would not be enforcing the ban and that, he was just going to let Donald Trump deal with it. And that makes sense because the ban was supposed to go into effect on the 19th, not 4 hours before on the 18th, but on the 19th. And then President-elect Donald Trump was going to be inaugurated on the 20th. That leaves just a little over 24 hours for Biden to go after TikTok for violating the ban. That didn't make sense to him. Doesn't make sense for anybody. He's like, let Trump deal with it. So then we wake up this morning in this everlasting abusive relationship that we're in with social media to a, hey, we're back, yay, blah, 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 bullshit on our screen. Now, TikTok released a statement saying that the reason why they're back is because they spoke with Donald Trump and Donald Trump assured them and their carriers that they would not be there would be no penalties or punishment for them keeping the app live while they figured out and reached an agreement with the US government on how to keep it around permanently for all of us users. This is a part that bothered me. The part that bothers me is that Trump said he wants the United States to have a 50% ownership position in a joint venture, meaning like the US government would own 50% of this platform. If that happens, it would make it state-run media, which is a cornerstone of authoritarianism. Before everyone clutches pearls, the First Amendment protects us from such a thing. We all have the freedom of speech. However, there are limitations to it, such as imminent threat to imminent violence. That's why you're not allowed to incite a riot. That's why you cannot scream fire in a theater where there is no fire. That's why you cannot scream bomb on a plane that has no bomb. It can cause mass panic and, stampeding and all that, and people can get hurt. And the right to public safety outweighs the individual right to freedom of speech. Rights of the public always outweigh rights of the individual because it's a lot of individuals versus one individual, if that makes sense. But this is what I think is going to happen, and this is why I think is nefarious about what's going on here. I believe there is going to be censorship if the US government owns 50% of this platform in any way, shape, or form, or any percentage of this platform in any way, shape, or form. They're not allowed to. Private company can. If a private company owned this by themselves and not in a joint venture with the US government, if they owned it themselves, they have a right to refuse service to anybody that doesn't agree with their terms of service or their community guidelines. No shoes, no shirt, no service. But if the US government owns a portion of it, then they can't censor your freedom of speech unless there's an imminent threat to violence or unless it exceeds a limitation. And that's where the gray area comes in, because if it is a joint venture between a private company and the US might try to get away with censorship, which would inevitably lead to a lawsuit about a violation of the First Amendment right to freedom of speech, which is a heavy topic against the US government. So it would most likely end up in front of SCOTUS, and conservative SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, has been siding with Trump's administration and Republican policy and legislation. It has not been siding with Trump individually, but has been siding with conservative MAGA Republican policy and legislation. Let's rewind to Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade was testing the waters of chipping away at our rights as U.S. citizens. Men hear it out. MAGA men hear it out. What you hear from MAGA when you start arguing a woman's right to bodily autonomy is what rights were lost. They can still get abortions in other states. It just went back to the states. If it was a federal right before, if they had a federal right to bodily autonomy and they no longer have that federal right, then they lost a right. Whether it goes back to the states or not, they lost a federal right, therefore a right was lost. But look at how gray that is. Well, we didn't take away their rights. They can still get it done, and if their state allows it, you just blame the state for it. It's not our fault. And since the legalization of same-sex marriage, states, red states, have been trying to put language into legislation or write legislation that would get people to try to challenge it, sue it, so go to SCOTUS, so SCOTUS could take a look at it and try to overturn it. Idaho is currently working on that right now. Here is the thing. So when DOMA went to the Supreme Court, Prop 8 in California was also going on at that same time. The lawyers that represented the plaintiffs in Prop 8 also represented the plaintiffs in DOMA. The reason why was because in California, same-sex couples were given the right to get married, and then Prop 8 was written in a way that was meant to confuse people, and it took away that right from people of the same sex to get married. Prop 8 established in a Supreme Court that was balanced that you cannot give rights to a group of people that are marginalized, whatever, and then take it away without it being considered discrimination. That was put in place as a safety net for whatever happened with DOMA. When DOMA was overturned, same-sex marriage was made a right available to everybody. But now you have Prop 8 saying, hey, you can't take that away from them because we've already established through you guys, the Supreme Court, that, you can't take away rights to a group of people that you've given it to without it being discrimination, as long as everybody else has that same right, has the same right to get married, so to speak. So now they're going after same-sex marriage, right? So Roe v. Wade was their way of chipping out a human right to be like, oh, but they can still get it done, just not everywhere. Same-sex marriage will be their way of completely overturning something, right? That was put into effect, law that was put into effect. So that's not them just chipping away. That's seeing if they can actually get it done. If a lawsuit against the United States for violation of First Amendment goes before SCOTUS, having already overturned Roe v. Wade, chipping away at human rights, and then having overturned, same-sex marriage, which had a little bit more protections surrounding it, it's not going to be a fucking leap for them to try to chip away at our First Amendment right. That's when they're going to get into the Constitution. And this just won't affect the left, the leftists, the liberals, the marginalized, the centrists. This will also affect MAGA and Republicans and conservatives if they want to speak out about promises not being kept to them, immigration laws not being strong enough, anything that they have an issue with the U.S. government can and will be probably censored against if they're able to chip away at the First Amendment like I think they're trying to. That would be a fascist strategy, by the way. Hope that helps.